Hey, what's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. Today, we got a special championship round edition. We got Kansas City versus the Baltimore Ravens, and they're playing in Baltimore with a 44-point total, and Kansas City are 4-point dogs in this one. Not a spot that we're used to seeing the Chiefs in, and this is their second road playoff game since the Patrick Mahomes era started. So it's an unusual situation for the Chiefs, but they have kind of overachieved in these playoffs. They faced against a couple opponents recently that had a lot of injuries that they were dealing with in the defense, and now they face a healthy Baltimore team. And I have Spread Astaire here to help me break down all the showdown slate analysis for this game. But before we get into that, make sure to hit the like button. Looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video a little bit closer to lock. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube page. I'm only 50 away from hitting that 500 mark. So make sure to subscribe. We'll be having a showdown slate for each game during these playoffs. And I'll also have a 2-game slate for this championship round coming out sometime this weekend. So you're going to want to subscribe to get access to that. Spread, what's going on, man? How's it going?
Man, I'm excited here. We only got 3 games left total, and I think we have an exciting slate this Sunday. And the game we're breaking down is not waiting on major injury news like that San Francisco game. So I think we can do much better analysis right now and not necessarily set it and forget it. But I don't think I'll be doing too much tinkering on Sunday after all the breakdowns we do here today. Whereas in that San Francisco game, it's going to feel like NBA where it might be up to lock before you're able to make final decisions going into that showdown slate, since the status of Deebo Samuel's so important, especially from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Like that Deebo news is going to be huge. Can make or break that game pretty much. You've seen how San Francisco has struggled this year without Deebo. So we've decided to focus on this Kansas City-Baltimore game for this show. And we have a lot less injury news that we have to deal with here. Isiah Pacheco has an illness, but I'm guessing that he'll be fine by the time the game is going. And other than that, I think for the most part, these teams are coming in pretty healthy considering the part of the season that we're in. And Mark Andrews is going to be back. We just got news on that officially that he's going to be playing in the championship game. So that's good news for Baltimore. Gives us a little bit of murkiness for the Isaiah Likely situation, which might be good because Mark Andrews is probably going to be eased in on this game. And I think that Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews both have a pretty good matchup, but it might be a good spot for us to take advantage of Isaiah Likely here. But yeah, Spread, let's get into it. Let's take a look at this slate and see which players that we like. One thing that I want to point out as far as, pressure situations that we're dealing with here, Lamar Jackson is in a pretty good spot as far as, the type of defense that he's facing off against. He has a pretty good success rate against man coverage, which is what Kansas City runs the most of. And he's got a good completion percentage against zone as well, but he's got a good completion percentage against man. He's pretty good under pressure this season, and Kansas City's getting about, like a 30% pressure rate, but Lamar Jackson has a 55% completion percentage against pressure, which is pretty good compared to the teams that are remaining on this slate. But yeah, what do you think of Lamar Jackson's matchup here, Spread? And is there anything that you want to point out as far as the defense that he's facing?
I think Lamar Jackson has a great matchup. And one thing that is in his favor is there's nothing to save it for. For example, in week 8, we're up by 10 points. Do I really need to run a quarterback draw? Do I really need to run a quarterback sneak? Or should I just keep handing it to my running backs and let my multi-million-dollar quarterback, who this whole system is built around, avoid the pressure? But here, there's no saving him for tomorrow. This is the biggest game of his career. there's going to be no reason not to be aggressive with him. And as cool as Zay Flowers and Justice Hill and Isaiah Likely are, still the most dangerous man with the ball in his hands, the most electric runner that we have, right? It's between him and McCaffrey. Literally the most electric guys we have left with the ball is Lamar Jackson. So I don't see any reason why they would shy away from using him as the dual threat that really separates him from the rest of the quarterbacks in the field for the 4 remaining teams. So I expect to see a lot of Lamar Jackson here. And on a Ravens build, I'm fine using him as the captain. I wouldn't be surprised if he had more than 100 rushing yards in a win or a loss.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I don't think there's a reason to get away from Lamar Jackson, the captain in this one. He has those pressure advantages. Kansas City's weaker against the run. I think they've struggled against rushing quarterbacks on top of it. So I do think that Lamar Jackson is in about as good a spot as he can be against this Kansas City defense, considering how he's performed so far this season. And I do like the Ravens in this one. I think as far as a betting standpoint, like Spread found something out right before the show started. Spread, you want to cover what your thoughts are on the betting aspect of this game?
As the Baltimore Ravens continue to take money, I think from a betting angle, if you're approaching this just from a money-making perspective and not I'm just having fun perspective, the Kansas City Chiefs, in my mind, present so much value. You still have the best quarterback in the game and arguably the coaching advantage. And this is one of the rare times where you can say that John Harbaugh is going to go into a game with a coaching disadvantage. And it might not matter, right? Because it might not be much of an advantage. But still, Andy Reid in the playoffs has been fantastic. So as this line continues to move, I'm looking at plus 180 on the Kansas City Chiefs right now. It seems to me like all the values on the Kansas City side. Another fun thing for this game, Simon, and another reason why I do like Lamar Jackson so much for those rushing yards, I think this game's going to go under. And if there's not a lot of touchdowns being scored, then now all of a sudden these yardage stats become more valuable in our showdown. Obviously, 100 yards rushing means a lot more in a 17-10 game than it would in a 47-35 game, right, Simon? Because there's not all those people going into the end zone. So that's another reason why I like Lamar Jackson, even in your Chiefs winning build. So we're going to have to go down to the bottom here, Simon, because both these teams, I believe, are top heavy. We're not looking at saying that, the San Francisco Niners, if Debo plays, have so many options at the skill positions. Here, it feels like the targets and the usage is going to be concentrated a lot more at the top, which means we're going to have to get really clever down there at the bottom to be able to afford the players that we want.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're going to have to make a decision, too, on which of these high-priced guys is going to kind of be the odd man out, the guy that you're going to want the least exposure to. And if I'm taking a look at it, for me, I think that guy is going to be Patrick Mahomes based on what we see his ownership percentages coming in at. Because as Spread mentioned, I think this game goes under as well. And I think in a game that goes under, it's because both teams are focused on the run. We saw that last week with Buffalo focused on the run game with Kansas City, which was, I thought it was a mistake because it kept Kansas City in that game. And it brought the game down to the last 5 minutes where the decision would be made on who would win. And you don't want Patrick Mahomes to be in the game still with 5 minutes left in it. And I think that Baltimore will probably take that same approach. Don't you, Spread? Don't you think it'll be more of them trying to keep Patrick Mahomes off the field?
And there's no reason for Kansas City not to do the very same thing. Lamar Jackson and that offense can be explosive. And if there's one thing that we know about him, he's always had the deep ball. Right when he came in the league, the deep ball was there for Lamar Jackson. Where he's really improved to become this elite player is his accuracy in the dump offs and in that mid-range attack. So the fact that the Ravens can score just as quick as well. So I think both teams have incentive to play a ball control style offense. We saw it last week with Andy Reid. He knows this isn't the team. He doesn't have Tyreek Hill and prime Travis Kelce anymore, although we did see a nice throwback vintage Travis Kelce performance last weekend. I think he understands it's going to have to be a balanced attack because the passing is so two-dimensional. At least it's not one-dimensional anymore, right? But there's only two targets that our opposing defenses are being scared of. They need to get the play action involved. And if Pacheco's not rolling, it's going to be too easy to sit in the too high and just keep everything in front of Mahomes.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. One thing that I'm looking at too, the vulnerability of the Baltimore Ravens recently has been in the run game. They have, or in the run defense, they've been bottom 8 as far as points allowed for DraftKings points. They've allowed 26 DraftKings points a game to running backs, which is a good matchup for Pacheco as well. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can kind of approach this depending on, which direction that we want to go to try to get different. Spread, if we have Lamar Jackson in the captain here, which of these, we might as well go with the run back right away on Kansas City, because we know we're going to want at least Kelce, Pacheco, or Rice, since that's such a condensed offense. Which of these guys do you think that you would prefer to have as the run back in this game?
Because of price issues, let's start with Rice.
Okay.
Because, like I said, this is going to be an expensive build.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say too about the like the Baltimore side of that, Spread's mentioning that we're looking for salary relief. We got guys like Zay Flowers at 8,400. Mm-hmm. The Baltimore passing game is pretty spread out. Flowers has had some nice games recently, but he does have the potential to put up like an 8-point game or something like that. And we don't know if Snead is going to be on Zay Flowers this week. Like, what would you think on that, Spread, knowing that, like Flowers is running, he's running about 30% of his routes from the slot. So he has a decent amount of slot exposure, but do you think that Snead is going to be primarily focused on Zay Flowers or like Odell Beckham this week?
You have to focus on Flowers and let Odell Beckham beat you.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham, if he had a different name, we would barely be talking about him. It's just because of the star power and the previous success that he's had. Now, the great part about him is he can break open for a game at any time. So I do believe that you have to account for him, and he's not just a walking nobody on the field. But at this point, Zay Flowers is so much more dangerous. I would be really surprised if Steve Spagnuolo doesn't focus his defense on stopping Flowers. And if Beckham beats him, Beckham beats him.
Yeah, that's a good call. And if that's the case, Snead allowed his first touchdown of the season last week, I believe, to Khalil Shakir. So that gives you an idea of how dominant he's been this season. And the number one wideouts are the ones that they've been shutting down. And as far as wideouts against Kansas City this season, they're only allowing 6.8 DraftKings points a game to that position. Slots have had a much easier situation where Kansas City has been allowing 20.5 DraftKings points a game. Question is, though, like which guys can take advantage in the middle of the field there? So we might be looking at, if we're thinking that Zay Flowers is going to be covered by Snead, I think that we need to look at those tight ends in this game as maybe a stacking partner to focus on, either Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews. And both of those guys are at that 6,600 mark spread. So what do you think? Like, if you were stacking Lamar with anyone in this game, knowing what Kansas City's defense is like, they're giving up only 9.2 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. But there was a stat that I heard last week from Rich Rebar, where he was talking about like Kansas City's allowed 52% of their completions to slot receivers. So, like I think Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews might fill that slot role this week, or might be where those targets go. Like what do you think about that, Spread?
I like likely more.
Yeah.
At this point, I know Andrews will be back, and maybe because of the chemistry they have, I could be wrong here, but likely he's been playing so well. I would expect him to get more snaps. And if he's effective, I wouldn't see why they wouldn't go right to him. I think it's interesting, though, because if Andrews really is 100% healthy, their passing attack out of 2 tight end sets is going to be not only it's going to be a great strategy, but it's going to be something that we don't really have on film, because how long has it been, and likely really emerged and developed that chemistry in Mark Andrews' absence. So even looking at film of him before Andrews' injuries when they were both on the field, I don't know if it's going to really prepare you for. So I like likely. I also don't mind playing both of them in certain builds where we have something that's brand new that the Chiefs won't be ready for.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point, because likely, he wasn't getting a ton of work with Andrews in there before. Obviously he started to break out when Andrews went down. So I could totally see them using more of those two tight end sets. And wouldn't that benefit the run game too? Do you think we should maybe focus on one of these Baltimore running backs? Because we know that it's going to be a run-heavy game, probably on both sides. And I'm seeing Justice Hill down there at 4,600 spread.
Yeah, and because Gus Edwards has the higher touchdown potential, but let's throw Justice Hill in there because we talked about needing salary relief. And now we have 57 left with 2 players left.
We got 2 players left. For me, like, I would lean Pacheco in this situation, but I think if we're looking for another Chiefs guy to put in, maybe like we could do a route where we put Beckham in there, and then we got at that point we're looking at a potential 4-2 Ravens build. We could put Tucker in there. We got Aguilar. Aguilar is another guy that runs decent amount of his routes from the slot. Aguilar might be a guy that kind of pops in this one. He had 4 targets last week, 5 targets versus Pittsburgh, 2 targets, and then he had 4 targets for San Francisco when they played San Francisco. So he's been getting a decent amount of targets. And if they're looking for a slot guy and Zay Flowers is going to be, have Snead on him, maybe Aguilar is going to be open up for some opportunities in this one too. So I don't hate Aguilar either. And then we got the defenses on top of it. But which direction would you like to go for one of these remaining 2 spots, spread?
Yeah, I think you made some good points. You could also do a 5-1 here and just do a 5-1 Baltimore and then, run it back with KC. Is a Baltimore blowout that crazy? I don't think so.
No.
I don't think KC can blow out Baltimore. I think Baltimore could blow out KC. And in fact, I think that's their best path to victory. If you're holding that Chiefs ticket and you're only down by 3 going in the 4th quarter, you're feeling pretty good and you're like, I made the right bet. Like, regardless of what happens, I have plus 180 or plus 4, and I'm down by 3 with 15 minutes to play. Really, if you're playing Baltimore, you want one of those classic beatdowns where not only do they get the win, they make a statement going into the Super Bowl that, hey, we are by far the best team in the AFC. We did not get lucky to get here. And then you don't have to worry about the playoff jitters, the playoff pressure getting to the team, right, that has all the questions around them. Because even if the Chiefs lose this game, no one doubts the Chiefs' championship medal. But there's still some doubts around Baltimore. So I don't mind a 5-1 here.
Yeah. For a 5-1, who do you think we should go? Do you think we go with maybe Tucker and another receiver?
Yeah. I like what you said about Aguilar.
Aguilar too. Yeah.
I say you go Aguilar and then just fill it in with either Tucker or Beckham.
Okay. So if we went with that direction, look at what that does for us too, spread. If you wanted to rotate Rice as the sole chief that we put in, you'd have an option of rotating in Kelce and Pacheco at that point too. So you could really use this build to rotate any one of those Chiefs guys in. And I think you'd also be able to, like if we put Pacheco in there, for instance, you'd be able to kind of take out Likely and put in Andrews in there too if you wanted to do an Andrews build instead of a Likely build. Let's see if that would work with Kelce in there. Kelce, you have no choice but to go with Likely in that situation. But there are ways that you can kind of use this build and this kind of construction to swap out some guys and get yourself some exposure to these different Chiefs guys. Because I don't think that Baltimore is a defense necessarily that you're going to want to have too much Chiefs exposure to. And there's such a condensed offense at this point. We're looking at the relevant Kansas City guys that I would even consider this week are, for if you're doing just a few lineups, the guys that I would focus on. I think I would fade Mahomes because I think that Baltimore is going to be too tough of a matchup for him to overcome. But I do think that, he can work his improvisation and stuff like that to beat Baltimore. But from a fantasy scoring percentage perspective, look at these last few weeks: 18.5 versus Buffalo, 18.5 versus Miami, 13 versus Cincinnati, 17.7 versus Las Vegas. And he had that 120-point week, but then you're looking at 14 and 14 again. So he's barely cracked 20 DraftKings points throughout the season. And I don't know if this is the matchup where he's going to break that string of bad games from a fantasy perspective. So I think the guys that I'm focused on for Kansas City on this slate, I want to have one of either Pacheco, Rice, or Kelce in probably every lineup. And I probably wouldn't want to have more than 3 of those guys. So max I would have is 2 of those guys in a lineup. And I don't even know if I want to have Kelce and Rice together. I would probably put Kelce with Pacheco or Rice with Pacheco if I'm going that route, just knowing that Baltimore is susceptible to the run, and Pacheco has been on a kind of a hot streak recently. 18 DraftKings points against Buffalo's tough run D last week. He had 15 against Miami. He had 32 against Cincy. He's just been on a roll towards the end of the season. So, pairing Isiah Pacheco with either Kelce or Rice in some of those Chiefs builds makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah, and I think you can find a fun build where you use Kelce and Rice together. And then you just have to hope that those are the only 2 getting targets because you can't afford Mahomes if you do that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? But I think that is an interesting way to say, hey, Mahomes has a pretty good day, but it's completely concentrated in 2 guys. They're the ones that get in the end zone. The other thing, though, is I did talk about it with Lamar. And I think the same thing applies to Mahomes, where I don't think during the season they ever want him taking off. Maybe 3rd and 7 and nobody's there, right? But I think he's coached. Don't take off. We've seen in the playoffs, he has no problem doing it. And that was wild when he had that sprained ankle last year. And then he was, we thought he wasn't going to be running it all. And he was still picking up first downs. So my concern fading Mahomes is that even if the targets are concentrated, if he runs one in, it's hard to see him not paying off his price tag. And it also is quite plausible to see him scrambling around in the red zone and taking off, bringing one into the end zone. So I think when you're building Kansas City, you can't do a full fade on Mahomes, and you do 2 of 3 with the receiver combinations, and then you build different combinations. You do a Kelce Rice, then you do a Mahomes Rice, then you do a Mahomes Kelce, and you just let it rock from there, and just hope you get the rest of the fill-ins right. But I wouldn't mind, figuring out the last 4 and then swapping out those top 2 combinations.
Yeah, and the spot where Baltimore has been most vulnerable has been to tight ends. They're allowing 14 DraftKings points a game to tight end position. So that sets up Kelce to have maybe the best matchup out of that pair of receivers. So I might lean towards Kelce if I was only picking one. But as Spread said, like if you want to use two, I think you want to have Mahomes. Try to get Mahomes in there. So you want to mess around, see if we can get one with Mahomes in there.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So if we want to go that direction, I think we need to either focus on getting like a guy like Kelce in there or Pacheco as the captain.
Let's start with the Kelce captain.
Okay.
Kelce Mahomes. We got 6K left for 4 people.
Okay, Kelce Mahomes.
Now, this is going to be a popular start. Wouldn't you agree? Anyone who's playing contrarian, I think that's a good way to play contrarian. So let's see. In this scenario, let's assume we get a turnover or something because we're going to need salary relief. You throw the Chiefs defense in there. Now we can start to think to run it back.
Okay. So we throw the Chiefs defense in there. Like Lamar is struggling in this one. He's got that playoff pressure, like hitting him, and Chiefs are firing on all cylinders. So if we want a
question is, how do we want to run it back?
Yeah, I think in this situation, if we're assuming that the Chiefs defense is successful, it's because they're doing their job and they're shutting down Flowers, right? And if Kelce is in there, maybe the Chiefs have taken a lead. So maybe that's going to, kind of take Gus Edwards out of the game script.
Right.
And, I think we're still in the same situation where we want to focus on having at least one of these tight ends in there. And then maybe a guy like Beckham or something. But which direction do you think we should go there, Spread?
Well, the cool thing about the tight ends is you can just swap them. So they just throw one in there right now and just know you can just build. Right as soon as I hit enter, I'm gonna rebuild the lineup and then just swap out the tight ends. Okay, so we throw a tight end in there. Doesn't matter who, and that makes it fun because we're not giving out the whole lineup. Where else would we go here? See, at that point, we have 7K left. We can afford to go high-low, or we can afford to go balanced.
Yeah. I think let's try to get Lamar in there, just because even if he's struggling in the passing game, he's going to be getting that running game volume no matter what. So if we do that, then we got to try to decide who we like best in the dumpster for this slate here, Spread.
All right, and as you see, as I'm in mid-sentence on the screen, my computer froze up, so you're going to have to scroll down for me.
Oh, sure.
Help out.
Yeah, we got, let's see, we're at 1,700 left. We got Dalvin Cook, who got a little bit of work last week. He got 8 attempts last week. He's not too bad at 1,200. We got Hardman, who had that fumble in the end zone. We got, let's see, we got Duvernay, who came back from IR, I believe, last week. And, he didn't really do anything. He hasn't really done anything all season. We got Ricard. They could always, do one of those fullback touchdown type of things. He had a touchdown back in week 17 versus Miami. Other than that, Richie James is a name that stands out, but he hasn't really done anything. But, he could be one of those guys that I think he does kick returns or something. He could always return one for a touchdown. But, I mean, at that point, you're just like playing craps. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think Justin Ross is a guy that got a lot of hype leading into the season. He did play versus Buffalo, it looks like, last week, but he didn't do anything. So Justin Ross would be a guy that'd be interesting if we knew that he was getting work. He's only 200, but other than that, I really don't see any names that stand out to me.
Yeah, that is kind of rough. I think you're right. It's Justin Ross or pass when you're dumpster diving.
Yeah. I think like in this situation with 1,700 left, I mean, it's Cook, Hardman, or you go Ross, and you try to upgrade at another position here.
This is why I'm getting frustrated with not being able to tinker here on the screen. I can't even see how you're tinkering. If you do that, how much do you have left?
So if I put in Ross, let's see. Okay, if I put in Ross, that leaves me with 1,500. And right now I got Kelce as the captain. I got Mahomes. I got Chiefs D. I got Likely, and I got Jackson. So maybe Chiefs D or Likely, we could move up from. If I took out the Chiefs D, that leaves me with
take out Chiefs defense.
Okay, yeah. If I do that, that leaves me with 5,100, and that puts me in that Nelson Aguilar range or Harrison Butker. I wouldn't mind Butker in this build if we're going 4-2 Chiefs, because that gives us Mahomes to Kelce and Ross, and then it gives me Butker as, like another guy with solid opportunity to score some points. And then for the Baltimore side, we're left with Lamar Jackson to Isaiah Likely. Now, keep in mind, if you're watching this, that Justin Ross is a complete crapshoot, and we would need to check what his status is even going into the game. He could easily be inactive for this, so don't bet the farm on Justin Ross by any means. But just know that he's a guy who in the preseason was getting a lot of buzz the last couple seasons. I think he missed the majority of last season because of an injury, and he has missed a decent amount of this season, maybe due to injury or maybe due to just being inactive. But from week 7 to 16, he was inactive. The guy has literally had 4 targets versus Minnesota. He had 4 targets in week 18 versus the Chargers when they rested the starters. And he has not really done anything with the targets that he's gotten yet, but he's known to be an explosive player. And I know that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce talked him up a little bit in the preseason, if not this year, then last year. But he was getting a little bit of hype in the preseason. People were excited about how explosive he was. And they are desperate for
on this. Yeah.
Go ahead, Spread.
I like Aguilar a lot here, or the kicker.
Yeah.
Oh boy, you got 3 good options there. I think you can finish with all 3 of those.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's a rotational spot, and that's if you want to use Justin Ross, and that's knowing that Justin Ross is a complete crapshoot.
Right.
So if we wanted to, let's see, let's go with a build Spread where we have Likely as a captain, knowing the vulnerability of Baltimore, like to the run game recently, and the Chiefs leaning on the run game recently. Let's say that the Chiefs lean on the run game to try to stay in this game and put Mahomes in a situation in that last 5 minutes of the game where they're down by less than a touchdown. They have an opportunity to.
Oh wait, we're putting Pacheco or Likely in the top.
I think Pacheco, but do you want to try someone else? Do you want to try Likely?
I thought you said Likely. Okay, so I got Pacheco on the top.
Okay.
All right.
So if we got Pacheco in there, like maybe let's give it Lamar Jackson.
Okay, that's the one I was liking too.
And then I think for me, I would lean Kelce over Rice if you wanted to use one of those pass catchers like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That leaves us with 4,500 left per guy. So if we want to get a little value here, Spread, which direction do you think we should go?
Well, we don't really like dumpster diving here. Mm-hmm. An interesting one to save money. What do you think of Noah Gray at 1,800?
That's not bad. Yep. Let's see. If I was using Noah Gray, I might
should
use
switch out to Rashee Rice, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do that real quick. Do you mind?
Yeah. Let's try it out.
We'll take Kelce out. We'll put Rashee Rice in. Now we have Pacheco, Jackson, Rice, Noah Gray, 6,400 per player.
Let's see. So 6,400 per guy. We got 2 spots left. In this one, let's try to go as low as we're comfortable with and see where that leaves us with. I think if I was doing that, maybe Justice Hill would be the lowest, I think. Bateman's you know what? Bateman's also an option. Look at what Bateman he got 3 targets last week.
He was someone I was so high on in best ball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
same here. And then he just disappointed. But look at what he's done like these last few weeks. Like in week 15, he had 6 targets against Jacksonville. He had 5 versus San Francisco. He had 6 versus Miami. He disappeared in week 8. Well, week 18, they rested the starters. But then he had 3 against Houston last week. But they were like blowing him out 34-10 at that point. But if we're expecting a close game, well, I guess he was getting targets when they were blowing out these other teams too. But yeah, Bateman's a guy that we can consider in play, I think. He's a cheap guy, but maybe not someone necessarily for this build. Like if we're looking to stay in that 6,400 range where we've seen a lot of guys that we like. So you think Hill?
I like Hill a lot.
Okay.
When you're playing Hill, you're hoping he's breaking one, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I'd say that's possible. I mean, that's definitely plausible.
So I like where that leaves us, Spread, because right now we have Pacheco and we have one of those 2 pass catchers in Rice. We got Noah Gray as kind of a crapshoot. We got Hill and we got Jackson on the Baltimore side. You know that Jackson likes to spread the ball out to those receivers. So, like we got Jackson representing the passing game and we got Hill hopefully breaking one. Because like Spread said, if they get in the red zone, it's going to be Gus Edwards' show. But Hill is a guy that has to kind of break one off, or he's got to, catch a touchdown, one of those types of situations. But the spot that it leaves us in, we got Gus Edwards, we got Mark Andrews, we got Isaiah Likely, all those guys we've talked about and we like. And then you could like go a little bit cheaper.
You know what's fun on this one, Simon?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, it's Pacheco captain. Never mind. I don't mind putting both Gus and Justice in, but that has to be a Ravens build.
Yeah, I like that too. Like if you're going to Ravens build.
If I did that one, I might do like Ravens defense captain. They get 2 turnovers and then it's just running backs all day.
Yeah. Which is like possibility because
just because you would have so much money if you do that. I'm gonna mess around with that right now.
The Chiefs have struggled all year, and Mahomes, if you look at the interceptions, he hasn't thrown an interception since week 16 against Vegas, but he's faced Miami, Buffalo, and Cincy in those games where he didn't throw one. But he threw 2 interceptions against New England. He threw 1 versus Buffalo, 1 versus Green Bay. He had 2 versus Denver. So he had 2 versus the Jets too. So with this group of pass catchers that Mahomes has this year, Baltimore is a sophisticated defense. They're going to know that he's only going to be targeting Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce for the most part, and they're going to be ready for it most likely. So, don't put it past being a situation where the Baltimore Ravens could get 2 interceptions and one of those can go for a pick 6 at least, Yeah.
So there's a lot of fun options here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's try one more with Likely,
okay.
like Spread was talking about earlier in the captain. All right, Spread, why don't you go over who you like in this type of build?
I mean, to me, anyone, unless you're just on a Chiefs build, Lamar's a lock, right? So you go Likely Lamar. is you have to throw him in there. Now we're at 69. And this one, let's have some fun with the Gus Edwards, Justice Hill combination. A lot of running from this team.
Okay.
Now we have 8,100 left. So they're playing from behind. You could put Kelce in there. And then you're kind of just choosing in that area of Tucker, Aguilar, Butker. I don't want to take MVS. I would just take one of those three, a kicker or Aguilar.
Yeah.
On this build. I guess you could put Odell in there too.
Yep. Odell's a situation too. He didn't get a lot of targets last week. It was kind of weird. Like I was expecting him to get a lot of work last week. I don't know what the situation. I figured they were keeping him fresh for the playoffs because if you look at those last few games in the regular season, he had 3 targets versus Jacksonville, 3 versus San Francisco, 1 versus Miami, and 1 versus Houston. So he's disappeared this last month or so.
I think he's failing to get separation.
Yeah.
He's a little older, and that knee injury is tough to come back from. He still knows how to run routes, and he still has some athleticism, but it's not just, no one can stay in front of him anymore. So right. I think that has more to do with his physical decline rather than a scheme or something that opposing offenses or defenses are doing.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. He's recovering from a second ACL repair in the past, like 4 years or something. So
yeah,
he's had some trouble with his knees recently. He had a couple games this season where he looked like he was coming back a little bit. Like he had that one stretch where he had 19 points against DraftKings points against Cincy, and then 20 against the Rams, his old team. But, other than that, he really has been MIA this season, and that makes a lot of sense what Spread said, being related to, potential age and, injury recovery or whatever. So, yeah, I think that this leaves us in a, like a good spot where we can at least, like roll the dice on him. If we wanted to rotate this last position in, we could rotate in Beckham. We got Tucker. We got Aguilar. We've talked about all those guys. We like Tucker. We like Aguilar. We like Butker. Like with Tucker and Butker, if you're expecting a close game, then these guys are going to be clutch for this range. Look at what Tucker has done in the stretch since week 11. He's only had 2 weeks since week 11 where he had less than 10 DraftKings points. So that's pretty solid for a guy who's 5,200. And then we got Butker. If we look at Butker's stretch, he's had a bunch of double-digit DraftKings points weeks, and he's always clutch. Like look at that week that he had against Cincy where he scored 24 DraftKings points. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it just shows the type of upside that Butker will have, and especially playing against a defense like the Ravens, which has the ability to stall out Kansas City in the red zone and set them up for field goals, because that Andy Reid is going to be trying to take points in this one where he can, knowing that the defense is going to be tough on him all game. So I like both kickers in this matchup. And if you think that maybe it's going more towards the under, like Spread and I both think, and more towards a run heavy approach, then I think you could potentially use both kickers in the lineup.
Yeah, there's so many fun options here, and I like the way some of these ones have turned out here. We got a lot of good ones in this lineup here, and Gus and Justice is fun to me.
Yeah,
if they both get there, I think a lot of people will avoid the kind of duplicity there. But if the Ravens really do a good job with that rushing attack, that could be the way to go.
Yeah, and I'll just add this and then get us out of here, Spread. But don't be afraid to use a guy like Gus Edwards in the captain either. because if the Ravens end up taking control of this game, keep in mind that Kansas City has played against a couple banged up defenses these last 2 weeks. And, they're kind of playing above their skis as far as the weapons that they have this year. And they were expected to lose on a couple occasions here, but they do have that reflex memory of being in the playoffs and being in this situation before. But don't put it past them to maybe fall behind in this game, and maybe Baltimore leans on Gus Edwards or something like that to try to kill as much clock as possible. And Gus Edwards has a good matchup against this Kansas City defense, and he's set up to have a decent game if they decide to lean on him. So don't be afraid to try to experiment with Gus Edwards and the captain either. And make sure to hit that like button. Looking for 15 likes to put out a shorter video a little bit later on. Going to be putting out a couple more shows this weekend. I got a Gamescript coming up for the San Francisco game, and then on top of that, a 2-game slate. I'll put up a video for that. And make sure to check out Spread over where he is putting up his content next. Spread, where can they follow you?
I'm at Spread Astaire on social media, Simon. And as the NFL season winds down, the work picks up for me because the NBA is my wheelhouse. So when you're ready to start winning an NBA, check out my page, check out the content, and we'll be ready to go.
He's also got some tennis content that he's putting out.
We'll be working on that right now.
Yeah. So make sure to check that out. He'll send you a link on his Twitter account. Just follow him over on Twitter and subscribe to this YouTube page. I'm at 450, looking for 500 by the end of the season. We've been averaging probably about like 30 a week, so I think we'll get there. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe and get us to 500. And thanks for watching, guys. Keep an eye out for the next videos.